Hi, I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and I'm with Stu Weiss, the founder of Studio City PXL, and we are Talking TV. Hello, Stu, and welcome.
It is a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation. And
Thank
by the
you.
way, may I compliment your background?
Well, thank
Blue
you.
roof and white trim and a bookcase. I think that's the way to go.
And I would like to also compliment you on the first roaring fireplace I've had here on Talking TV in its history, I believe. So
Well,
we
for you.
we're well situated here. And today we are talking about daytime television, which I don't think I've broached on this program yet at all, and wanted to talk to you now. First, just to start us off, just tell us what Studio City is, so viewers and listeners can understand.
Sure. Studio City is this. Wow. It's quite amazing what's happened to Studio City. It started off in 1995. We're in our 26th year doing television marketing. Most of our focus in our first 7 years was prime time, and then we evolved into daytime around 2002. We did some daytime in the 90s, but really went at it full bore in the 2000s. And so one by one, I think the studios realized that it is a lot cheaper and more economical and more efficient for them to send their promos out of house to do it at one, say, I hate to use the word factory, but one major hub to send all of their work. And so we found efficiencies in ways to support all the studios and support all their daytime product. And so now we're doing about 7 of the top 10 shows, doing the daily topical promos for the Ellen DeGeneres Show and the Wendy Williams Show and Live with Kelly and Ryan, then the Dr. Oz Show and the Drew Barrymore Show and Family Feud and Hot Bench, Judge Judy's Court Show, and Judge Mathis. And dear God, I think I'm leaving somebody out. And oh my God, the Kelly Clarkson Show. And there's just great efficiencies when you have these these talented editors and graphic designers and writers who are very, very familiar they're all going after the same audience. Let's face it, it's women 25 to 54. That is where the target demo is. And so we're just uniquely situated mentally and creatively to be talking to that audience day in and day out.
And of course, in addition to the promos, you also provide the social media support and some of the website support as well for some of these shows, which maybe we'll touch on the social media side of this a little bit. So first, just on the top line here, let's look at in the pandemic year, the viewer television has had something of a boom in many regards. But how has daytime fared? What are some of the macro trends that you have observed about daytime ratings wise and in terms of audience behaviors over the last months?
Well, let me tell you, I mean, when March 11th came down last year and we knew we were in a pandemic and little by little shows were going offline, and it was great. You could imagine as a business owner, just as a human being, I mean, it was a terrifying 3 weeks there in March of 2020, where you didn't know what was to come next. Certainly health wise and survival wise, but then of course business wise. And of course, every show went out of production for a brief period of time. But then as what happened, at least for us, Dr. Oz, who is uniquely situated to have said, look, I need to get my voice out there. While I don't have access to a studio, I do have a basement. I can get cameras. You know, production can be done with an iPhone. I need to get this vital information out to my viewers on a daily basis. So from his basement in New Jersey, he was among the very first talk shows to get back on the air in a matter of like a week. I think we were down on pretty much all of our shows for a max of 1 week. And Dr. Oz's case might have been even less. And then very quickly, Kelly and Ryan, saw that and looked around and thought we can do our show also from our homes. And little by little, every show came back. Wendy Williams started doing a show from an apartment in New York, and Ellen, of course, did her show from her home north of here in Santa Barbara. So little by little, all the shows came back, and all the hosts. Kelly Clarkson was doing her show from a cabin in Montana. So they all came back very, very quickly. And that was one of the advantages that daytime had over primetime, that with very little effort, the expectation of production is not quite that of a WandaVision, that you can, bring your show back online with, 3 cameras and some lighting, kind of like what we're doing here, and bring your talk show back on the air. And,
So
they were all super resilient and got back on the air very, very quickly.
we know they came back. They came back, but what about the viewers? Well, when the viewers came back too eventually, but what, as we settled into trends in pandemic viewing over these many, many months now, what have you noticed about where the audience is in this space?
Well, everybody suffered. Certainly. I mean, numbers are down in the pandemic, even in the fall and now. I think prime time is off. I think what happened is, look, streaming made major inroads. They got very, very comfortable with American viewers during this period. Disney Plus was launched, and we became good friends with Netflix and Lion. Oh my God, Tiger, help me. The Tiger thing.
You've got Paramount Plus and Peacock, and there are loads of streamers out there, and viewers have enormous choices. So yeah, I mean, how is daytime holding its own against this massive incursion or this enormous phenomenon of streaming?
Right. So I think everybody got hurt with the phenomenon of streaming, but who really got hurt is prime time more than daytime, because all those streamers and the production value and the content that they're putting up on these streaming services is just incredible, and certainly Oscar worthy content is up on the streaming services. But daytime is unique. Daytime has a unique relationship with its viewers, and the viewers came back very, very, very quickly. So while there was a hit that all television had, all broadcast television had, daytime had certainly less of one. Primetime might be down a third, daytime is down maybe 20%, maybe closer to 15%.
Well, let me jump in on that. What about daytime is still unique? We have a lot of talk shows, we have court shows. Obviously, lots of syndicated programming there. What in that uniqueness is considered still valuable by viewers amid so many choices?
Well, what's interesting about daytime, and we all know it, we've all had that aunt, grandmother, and mom who've always had their soaps or that daytime show, whether it was Oprah or General Hospital. These are relationships that aren't days old. They don't go one season with an Oprah. You're watching her every day for years and years. And same thing with General Hospital. You're not watching General Hospital for a year. You're watching it for decades. And that's the relationship that daytime has with its viewers. There's nothing on television like the relationship that daytime viewers have. Family Feud has been around some 30 years. Live with Kelly and Ryan, that show is around. Obviously, Regis started it. That was 38 years ago that Regis started live. And then The Price is Right is coming up on 50 years. Family Feud, I think I've already mentioned that one. So these shows have been on. Dr. Phil is coming up on 20 years. So they've all been around for a decade or more, and that's a beautiful thing about launching a daytime show. If you're able to get past year 2, you're going to be there for probably decades. As Dr. Oz, again, 14 years, and a lot of these shows are 20 plus years. We forget that.
Well, so then one of the more interesting stories that emerged out of the pandemic was the launch of Drew Barrymore's show, which launched in remote production, which was, I mean, she's known to people from her days as a child actor, but she's been trying to get that show off the ground for a while. It finally happened this year. And then it happened where she didn't have a live studio audience, and she was having to forge this new relationship in this context with an audience, and has just been renewed for a second season. So what what happened there? What did she do right? And what was resonating with audiences that enabled that show to succeed?
Well, first of all, God love Drew Barrymore and everybody associated with that show, because how would you like to launch a show? Let's look at the situations that she had to launch in. Not only was there a pandemic, but she was also launching in September, when we weren't really focused so much on entertainment television and talk shows in September as much as we were, oh, this election that was coming up in 2 months. So it was a double whammy of fragmented audiences watching, keeping track of what's going on with the pandemic, and of course the election, and then followed by an insurrection. So this is probably the worst year to have possibly launched the show, and then to get renewed for a second season is phenomenal. And there's nobody like Drew Barrymore. We know who Drew Barrymore is, and again, she went in the exact opposite way of what every other a lot of television networks and stations were doing. I mean, we were talking about the pandemic, we were talking about the election. Not all of it necessarily happy, and Drew was this oasis from all that. It was a happy place. They were talking about tuna casserole recipes, and of course her engagement with celebrities. The way they're going to talk to a Drew Barrymore is very, very different than the way they're going to talk to a Jimmy Fallon or a Jimmy Kimmel. It's a very, very different, and I think a probably more intimate relationship, because Drew Barrymore was a celebrity and still is, obviously, but there's that shorthand, I think, that she has with the people who appear on her show, and she was just a feel good and desperately needed voice in the midst of all that mess that we were going through.
So when you were promoting her show over what was the character of those promos? How was it? What was different about, again, trying to even though we may be familiar with her acting, how did you have to craft those promos? What was the messaging there that may be different from more established shows that you work on?
Well, again, I think what was different with Drew is, say, for instance, to a Dr. Oz or a Dr. Phil, who's maybe dispensing more serious information. Drew is a lighter form of entertainment, and living within mostly that CBS environment. So if you were coming to the Drew Barrymore show, you were coming there for just an hour of peace, and happiness and calm, and cheesecake recipes and home decorating recipes and just comfort food. Drew was daytime comfort food away from everything else.
Mm-hmm. So, it's a lot of people, a lot of celebrities have tilted at the windmill of trying to get a talk show off the ground, and big names have failed in that space. They just haven't made it. What, in your experience over the years of seeing some do this and very few do it and succeed, and many others failing, what are the different characteristics? How does one work versus the many failures there?
It's so interesting seeing who has made it and who hasn't. Anderson Cooper is the jewel in the crown at CNN, but yet couldn't make it in daytime. Kris Jenner, is there a more powerful force that keeping up with the Kardashians? A force in prime time didn't make it in daytime, and sometimes it's just the environment that they're in. Maybe it's just the format that they're in. Like the Wayne Brady show was on in the '90s. I believe it was a Disney product that was out there. He did a talk show. It didn't work. But Wayne Brady's been on now for about a decade on deal. Let's make a deal. In a game show format, he's successful. Sharon Osbourne, let's not forget, she had her own daytime talk show. It was on for one season, one and done. But then
or scorched earth with her now too.
Well, but here's the thing. So as a single host show, it didn't work. But when she was put in a multi hosted format, her and Julie Chen and Cheryl Under. Oh my goodness, Cheryl, forgive me. We've done your pros. Anyway, with Cheryl and the whole team, it worked as a 5-person format. It worked very well. Obviously, what she and CBS are going through right now with the talk, that's not working, and certainly she's they've decided to part ways, and that's an ongoing story certainly. But in a group format, it works. So sometimes it's the right person for daytime, just in the wrong format, as is the case with Wayne Brady and Sharon.
So let me just ask you,
You know, magnificent personality, huge personality. Just didn't make it in daytime, but certainly a huge hit on CBS in primetime.
so let me ask you lastly, the pressure from streaming is not going to get any less as new streamers come on board. How is daytime? I mean, you talked about the value proposition earlier, that the relationships, the longstanding relationships that viewers have with individual programs, and that goes back decades in some cases. Of course, newer shows don't have that advantage when they're coming online, and just the proliferation of choices keeps getting bigger and bigger. So what can daytime do to defend its territory still? What other steps can be had, and how do you see that trend continuing?
Well, right now, I don't believe daytime really needs to do much, because for some reason, Netflix and Apple and Amazon and all those, the feeding frenzy that's going on for viewers seems to be happening in prime time. They're going after that primetime viewer, and now as we all get back to work, obviously that's going to accelerate. So the kind of fare that the streamers are offering mostly is primetime viewing. They don't seem to be going after Ellen and Kelly and Dr. Oz and all the fare that we're accustomed to in daytime. I don't even think there's a soap opera that's ongoing in any of the streaming services. So for whatever reason, they've opted to stay out of that territory. Yay! Now I'm not going to whistle past the graveyard here and say they ain't coming. Certainly it's going to happen, but I think there's the zigging and zagging has yet to be determined. Right now, daytime is doing very well. Advertisers know it's doing very well. You get the biggest bang for your buck in daytime because you have real consumers there, 25 to 54-year-old women. That's a real consumer audience, and advertisers know that, as opposed to say the guy who lives in mom's basement demo that some channels are going after, which is what streaming frankly is going after in a lot of cases. So daytime is doing pretty well. I remember when we first made that evolution from primetime to daytime in around 2002, when we went full bore, and there was an executive who was working at one of the studios on one of the big daytime shows. When he saw that Studio City was evolving into daytime, he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "What are you doing? This is all going to be gone in 5 years. This is dead. This is a dead and dying business. What are you doing?" And that was in 2002. So here we are 20 years later, and we're doing just fine is what we're doing.
All right. Well, we'll see how this trend continues. Stu Weiss from Studio City, thank you so much for being with me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.